But I am trying to gain the Vaishnava's grace by trying to just fulfill this. And so Shri Rupa Raghunatha Charaner able Jara Smrite Siddha Hoye Vanchita Sakal. So our fulfillment of desires in devotional service happens by Shri Rupa Raghunatha Charaner able, by putting faith in the lotus feet of the Goswamis. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Charaner. And having faith that time is not a barrier, space is not a barrier in accessing spiritual power. Spiritual power is accessed beyond time and space. And it is accessed when one aligns one's will with the will of those Vaishnavas. And therefore, that is the grace of the parampara. So we are not alone. We may be struggling, but our struggle is supported by a very powerful lobby, which is the Vaishnava Sampradaya. So therefore, Prabhupada mentioned about management, some interesting points. Prabhupada said, 5 points he mentions. Number 1, he says, manage nicely, let the movement go forward. Number 2, manage nicely, but number 2, make sure that the movement is going forward. Third is organize. Fourth is don't go backward in your habits, in your thought process, in your faith, even if there are some obstacles and difficulties. And fifth, he says, be careful of the influence of material energy. So therefore, Prabhupada mentions a very important point. When one becomes fixed up in devotional service, he says that one experiences 2 symptoms. What are the 2 symptoms of one who is fixed up in devotional service? He says, a fixed up devotee in devotional service never allows, number 1, a person, and number 2, a problem. He does not allow a person or a problem to do two things: to hamper his service or to discourage him in any way. Very interesting. Prabhupada makes this. This is a symptom of being fixed up in devotional service. Let us not allow any person or any problem to either hamper our devotional service or discourage us in any way. So Prabhupada has another interesting statement. He says, I may be discouraged but not disappointed. That means when some event or incident happens, so there may be some temporary, feeling, oh, why this, how this came about, but not that why should I continue? No, that is disappointment. When one starts questioning, should I continue? Prabhupada said, I may be discouraged but not disappointed. And therefore, dishtya bhrata pravayasa idanim aprajasyate prajashaya nivrittasya prajayat samapadyata. This is the famous discussion happening between Vasudev and Nanda Maharaj. When Nandotsav happens, Nandastu atmaja utpanne jata lado mahamana aruhya vipran vedagyan snata shuchi alankrita. That Nanda Maharaj is experiencing the peak of bliss. Atmaja utpanne, after a long time, child has been born. Jat ahlado, already he is Nanda. And Krishna is born, so he is even more in ecstasy. So, our tendency is that when we experience distress, we look for breaks. But when we are going through pleasure, we don't look for a break. We don't try to break an episode of joy. When pleasure comes, because we are pleasure seeking, we want to prolong the experience of pleasure. So Krishna, with Nanda Maharaj and Nandotsav being celebrated by the entire Braj, it was an experience of uninterrupted bliss. Gopa parasparam hrishta dadikshira gratambubi asinchanto vilimpanto navanitascha chikshipu. They are just throwing various milk products on each other, godhan, enjoying, celebrating Krishna's appearance. So the bliss has reached unprecedented levels. Who wants to stop that? But Nanda Maharaj is qualified to be Krishna's father because his focus is not on his personal bliss. His focus is on what is best for Krishna. So immediately the thought comes, if the king sends his men to collect taxes, hearing so much of festival happening, and then they try to harm the child, it is not good. So better I go and pay the taxes in Mathura itself. Kamsasya varshikyam kurudvaha. Let me just go and pay the taxes there. So Nanda Maharaj interrupts his bliss to go and meet Kamsa so that he doesn't come and bother Krishna. So that is the idea, that he is thinking about what is required for Krishna. So when at that moment he meets Vasudevji, so Vasudevji has lost 6 sons. It has been a period of great disaster. This entire year has been difficult for all of us. So much of disappointment, so much of destruction, so much of deaths. So when things appear dark, so we have to look for the silver lining, and the philosophy helps us see the larger picture. So Vasudevji has lost 6 sons. And so when Nanda Maharaj comes, we would expect Vasudevji to start telling Nanda Maharaj, his closest friend, do you know what I went through over the last few years, about how Kamsa in front of my eyes picked up each and every of my 6 small, tiny, few hours old children, raised them above his head and smashed their tender body against the hard rock for the fountain of blood to splash in all directions. And I had to see each one of that. So he could have actually begun like that, because to lose 6 sons in such a ghastly manner can be extremely traumatic. So one cannot imagine the kind of trauma which Vasudeva and Devaki had to go through in that jailhouse of Kamsa. The bliss of Janmashtami sometimes covers over the severe distress which Vasudeva and Devaki had to go through. And that was real. It was not that they were both, winking at each other saying, Leela, this is all part of Leela. These children are also there somewhere, and, he'll sort it out. No, it was not like it was some kind of a shooting going on. They were actually totally involved. And so when Nanda Maharaj meets Vasudevji, the first thing Vasudevji says is, he is glorifying Nanda Maharaj, expressing his joy that he got a son. He doesn't say son, he says progeny. Dishtya bhrata pravayasa. Idanim aprajasyate. So far you were without praja. Prajashaya nivrittasya. Prajayat samapadyata. At last you got a progeny. Why he says praja? Because if he said son, it would be a lie.